At howsgrow.com. It's all about the beans. Read and follow pesticide label directions, grain marketing, and other stewardship practices.
Your friend in Central Illinois. WHOW.
Top of the morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm your host today, Seth Lawrence. The WHOW Morning Show streams to Facebook and YouTube. It's brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agent in Clinton. My guest in this segment of the morning show is Mrs. Mary Vogt. She is the superintendent of Bement Schools. Good morning, Mrs. Vogt. How are you today?
Good morning, Seth. I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing great. And I got to ask Mrs. Vogt, of course, we get upon the Thanksgiving. I don't know why. For some reason, my head was, until just now, was registering that I'm talking to you on Monday, even though I'm totally in Friday mode in every other way. For some odd reason, I was in my head, I was like, it's Monday. I got to ask her what's her plan for her students this week. So let me rephrase it. What's your plan for your students next week? Like, what's their schedule like leading up to Thanksgiving?
Sure. We have school on Monday and Tuesday, and I'm really excited. We have our elementary do their own version of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, where they create balloon animals and have the balloon animals on a stick and parade them around. And Seth, this year, our fifth graders are coding robots to put their parade balloons on, and then writing the code for the robot to take their balloons through the parade. I saw them practice yesterday. It is unbelievable. Mm-hmm. Absolutely unbelievable. So cool.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Mrs. Vogt, I feel like back in the day, and this was, 2023, I graduated in 2006, so we're talking 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Mrs. Vogt, we would have to go to school on the day before Thanksgiving. I never had the day before Thanksgiving off. You guys are too nice to the kids these days. I'm telling you.
Well, in my prior district, the way it was handled was that parent-teacher conferences, now I'm tangent here, but my guess is, like me, when you were going to school, there was a full day off for students for teachers and parents to have parent-teacher conferences. Well, now parent-teacher conferences all take place in the evening. And so what school districts do is say, okay, our teachers are working between two parent-teacher conference nights. They're working a full day. So my prior district, it was that day before Thanksgiving that then was the trade time. So because of parent-teacher conferences, you get the day before Thanksgiving off. In Bement, we have parent-teacher conferences 2 nights, Tuesday, Thursday, typically the weekend before what has been known as Columbus Day. And we do our day off trade time that Friday before the Columbus Day, so our teachers and students get 4 days. And then we just write it into our schedule that the day before Thanksgiving is a day off.
Oh.
And
interesting.
Well, but personally, I will be spending that day doing quite a bit of cooking. Some families travel. So I think the trend has become to have that day off because of families traveling more. When I was growing up, we went 3 blocks down the street to my aunt's house for Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
There just wasn't travel
right.
like there is now.
Right.
And okay, you said you graduated in what year?
2006.
Okay. So I graduated in 91, Seth.
Now, do you remember, did you have to go to school the day before Thanksgiving, Mrs. Vogt?
We did, yes.
Yeah. So, gosh, we're just too nice to the kids these days. That's what it is. We're just too nice to them. But go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. We don't take a traditional spring break. What we do is we have a school improvement day, usually the Wednesday before Easter. So our students get out at noon, teachers work a full day, and then we take the Thursday, Friday, and Monday after Easter off. So that is our spring break. We don't have a full week of school off. But the flip side of that is that come May, our last day is scheduled to be May 17th, which is a solid 2 weeks earlier than most districts.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, I'm not totally obtuse to the fact that, like, you know, we're too nice to the kids. Like, I feel like I honestly do feel like high school, you know, junior high, grade school, they have so much more on their plate than I ever did. I genuinely believe that. So I'm just being kind of facetious here, but no, it's so coming up on Thanksgiving, get the 22nd off and into the swing, or kind of final leg, if you will, of the first semester, which I can't believe we're here already, Mrs. Vogt. But let's turn our attention this morning and talk about the school report card, Mrs. Vogt. That came out I think late last month, if not earlier this month. How did Bement schools fare on the latest report card?
Yeah, I am so proud. This is the second year that our middle school has received an exemplary designation. So the designations have been in existence for 5 years. Last year was the first year that the middle school had received that exemplary designation. And then out of 11 area schools that received it this year, we're only one of 5 that has received it for a second time. Our elementary school has been designated as commendable, which again is in that top 2 of designations. And then interestingly, our high school did not receive a designation. And the reason for that is there are 8 scored indicators for the designation. And you have to have at least 20 students worth of data for 5 out of the 8 indicators. And some of our class sizes were pretty low in our high school last year. So we didn't have 20 students in all of our high school classes. So we actually only had enough data for 3 out of the 8 scored indicators. So that's created a little bit of, you know, burden of responsibility then on the district, because the state doesn't give us the raw data that they use. So now I'm going in and digging into each of those indicators for the students in our high school last year and trying to just see, you know, percentage wise, where do we end up? But yeah, so I'm super proud. What I shared with our board at our board meeting last week is, you know, it can be very frustrating because the overall report card, it's a result of compiling several individual variables. Often those individual variables are just a single snapshot from one moment in time. And so it can be very frustrating. That being said, our district is showing that we continue to make progress. So it's one of those, absolutely, we have reason to celebrate, but I celebrate cautiously because we are such a small district.
Right.
You know, we could have one student, you know, bomb something, and percentage-wise, it won't necessarily look like one student, but you know, one student out of 20, that makes a huge difference in a district our size. So
yeah,
we just try to be very cautious.
Well, and you would think there would be a little kind of awareness from the state of Illinois to look at your student body population and perhaps understand that discrepancy. You know what I mean?
Well, Seth, you would think. Now, I try not to be too critical of the state and the way things operate because
you're just too nice is what it is.
So I want them to be able to help me when I have a question. But I feel like so many of the systems that are in place have been in place the same way for decades, but yet we're being asked to perform in a different way. So eventually it will all catch up and resolve itself. And I hope I'm still in the business to see that happen.
Sure. Mrs. Vogt, one thing I have heard a lot of, and again, we're talking with Mrs. Mary Vogt, superintendent of Bement schools. One thing I've heard, I don't want to say a little bit of so far as I talk with your peers about the school report card is absenteeism and chronic absenteeism. Are you seeing that much in Bement schools?
You know, and this is, again, something I tried to clarify for my board. When we started last school year, Seth, we were still under the COVID restriction guidelines, where if a student tested positive for COVID, they were required to quarantine for 10 days. So we started last school year with that requirement, with many students having to stay home, but that doesn't get broken down in the report card. So yes, we had a lot of absences. We had students who were absent more than 10 days. but it wasn't because they were choosing not to come to school. It was because the guideline was they had to stay home.
Right. So, and I know that there's been a lot of conversation about this kind of being a lingering impact of of COVID, where kids were at home, and so now it's getting them back. But that also goes kind of into parental involvement, and I venture a guess districts with good parental involvement, they probably have they probably don't see much or I shouldn't say see much. They may not see as much of the absenteeism.
Right, and I mean, I'm not seeing that it is an issue for us that is, I just don't see it as a chronic problem like some of the larger districts are seeing. For the most part, our students enjoy coming to school. They want to be at school. And, our absenteeism rate was lower than the state average. So that area in particular isn't a concern. Something that I'm not sure becomes, a talking point that for me is a concern. Teacher retention. I'm not concerned about the absenteeism. I'm not concerned about enrollment. We are seeing an increase in enrollment. We're seeing improvement. I call it, we're recovering from some of the COVID years in these areas that are collected and reported on. But the area where I am really honing in on is teacher retention, because Seth, our district has not performed better in teacher retention than the state. On any report card, I've looked all the way back to 2018. The state has a higher teacher retention rate than our school. Now, mind you, we are a small school, so one teacher leaving, percentage-wise, has a higher impact than it would for a larger district. But my feeling is, if we can improve our teacher retention, then ultimately that is going to lead to continued quality instruction. I think of, how well our middle school has performed. Well, it's because of the curriculum that's in place. Our 8th graders have had 3 different language arts teachers in middle school. Now, for some districts, it's probably like, okay, well, what's the big deal? Do you have a 6th grade, a 7th grade, and an 8th grade language arts teacher? No, we have one middle school language arts teacher who teaches 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. They one teacher in 6th grade, a different teacher in 7th grade, a different teacher in 8th grade. But they're still able to perform well compared to the rest of the state because of the systems that we have in place. So, my gosh, can you imagine if we can get a consistent teacher in there who can get to know the kids, build a relationship with the kids, and I think it would be amazing.
Well, a couple of things to wrap up this conversation, Mrs. Vogt. Something you just said I really should have been asking about, but I'm glad you brought it to my attention. Is there pieces of data, or is the data itself in any way reflective of the like we've talked learning loss the last couple of years, right? With the kids out of school and the in and out of the classroom and all of that stuff, there for a couple of years. Is any of this kind of starting to show the learning loss and it catching up to schools in its report card data? How do you feel about that?
I don't feel like the report card data does reflect that as well as we can using our own local assessments. So the ESSER money, the title money that we have been able to use to provide additional instruction, to provide additional staff, that's where I can look at the data and see, okay, this year we had 40 students who received intervention services, and 30% of those students were dismissed by the end of the year because they had made adequate progress. So I feel like locally we can track that data better than it is shown on the report card. The report card, again, it's just that here's your IAR testing, and how did you do this year compared to last year?
Last thing you mentioned, this because of the size of your district, 1 or 2 kind of anomalies, if you will, in your sets of data can maybe skew how you're rated and those sorts of things. I don't know how much deep diving you've been able to do to this point, Mrs. Vogt, but have you been able to find, really how you're doing, get a feel for, okay, yes, the report card rated us or said this, but I went back and looked, and this is really how we're doing. Like, have you had a chance to really do any of that to this point?
In some areas, not the entire report card. Mm-hmm. And again, for the public, what they do is click on the link, go to the snapshot view, first thing, but then I take a look at, gosh, our district finances, it's showing we're spending $14,000 per student. Holy cow, what are we doing with that money? But the thing is, as our enrollment had decreased over the years, the money gets divided over fewer students, so it appears as if we have so much more money that we're spending. Well, it's not that we have a different amount of money coming in from the state, it's that we have fewer students we're spending it on. Mm-hmm. So anyhow, Seth, I could go on and on about the data, and what I need to remember is our district, the data shows that we are doing well, we are making progress. We do have exemplary and commendable schools, and I know there are superintendents throughout the state who would love to have the problems that I'm having.
Your cost per student is a drop in the bucket compared to CPS. Goodness, and your returns are exponentially higher, I'm sure. So yes. I would say you're doing quite well. I know there's some things that are concerning, and you're always looking to address those and get better and all of that stuff. But right. You do. I appreciate the way you said. I got to step back and say, the problems I have are minuscule compared to others. So yeah. For sure. Very good. Well, Mrs. Vogt, I'll tell you what, let's take a break here and come back with some more. Mrs. Mary Vogt is the superintendent of Bement Schools, my guest on the phone. More to come with her on the morning show.
WHOW.
Let's check the opening numbers now. The Chicago Board of Trade on this Friday. Jim Taylor on the RFD Radio Network. We start the day in the red with corn, beans, and Chicago wheat futures. December corn 471 down 3 3/4. March corn down 3 3/4. 489.5. May corn starting today $5 even down 3.5. January beans 1352 3/4 down 7.5. March beans opening 1367 3/4 down 7 1/4. May beans 1379 down 7.5. December wheat 548.5 down to nickel. March wheat down 5 1/4, 575 3/4. May wheat on this Friday 591.5 down a nickel. December bean meal 459.80, that's down $7. And December bean oil 52.49 up 86 cents. Opening numbers at the Chicago Board of Trade on this Friday morning. Jim Taylor, RFD Radio Network.
Looking for Chevrolet inventory? This is Scott Baum from Baum Chevrolet Buick here in Clinton. We have the all-new Chevrolet Trax, Blazer, and Trailblazers coming. Plus, several Chevrolet Equinoxes and Traverses are here. This month, take advantage of extra $1,000 trade-in assistance on your trade. There's always a need for quality trades here at Baum's. BaumChevyBuick.com. Right from the start.
Warner Hospital and Health Services in Clinton. CEO Paul Scarron reminding you our walk-in clinic inside our family medicine building will treat your flu symptoms without an appointment. Find out more by clicking our icon at DeWittDailyNews.com.
For the latest in Central Illinois agricultural news, visit IllinoisFarmRadio.com. Get updated information on markets, weather, ag news, local interviews with NAFB farm broadcaster Jared White, and much, much more. All at IllinoisFarmRadio.com.
Your friend in Central Illinois, WHOW.
Once again, a good morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm your host today, Seth Lawrence. The WHOW Morning Show streams to Facebook and YouTube, brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agent in Clinton. Mrs. Mary Vogt is the superintendent of Bement Schools, my guest on the phone for today. Mrs. Vogt, what else has been kind of on your plate lately? Kind of pun intended with the Thanksgiving holiday coming up. What else has been kind of occupying your time and your mind lately besides school report card? What's going on in Bement Schools?
And that's the thing that I I really try to do is highlight those things that are going well in our district that the report card just can't reflect. So our high school cross country team had 2 athletes make it to state, Will Fusen and Dylan Howell, and they performed very well. Will medaled. Dylan, I wish I would have written down the numbers when they were shared with me, but both of our runners finished extremely well. Dylan is a senior, Will is a sophomore, so I'm excited to see where his future takes him. Our CGB, Sarah Gordo Bement high school volleyball team made history by winning the regional championship and making it to the Sweet 16. So wonderful things happening there. We had an amazing Veterans Day program to honor our veterans. Last week, we had Jed Mackey come in. He's retired from the Army, has 2 children who attend school in our district, and we're just so very fortunate to have the support from the community that we do. We brought in Detective Rich Witsaki to speak with our middle school.
He's awesome. Yeah, he's so good.
Yep. So he spoke with our middle school and high school students last Friday morning, and then our staff Friday afternoon. Just the wealth of knowledge he has about keeping kids safe and teaching them to stand up for themselves and don't fall for some of these scams that are out there. On Monday, we have Senator Sally Turner coming as part of the Principal for a Day program.
Yeah,
Sally,
she was on my show yesterday.
Yeah, yep. So she will be in our district on Monday. So again, we have so many great things happening. I am actually going to spend the weekend with 6 out of my 7 school board members. This is the weekend of the joint annual conference between the Illinois Association of School Boards, Illinois Association of School Business Officials, and Illinois Association of School Administrators. So those 3 agencies have a conference in Chicago. Like I said, 6 of my 7 board members are able to attend. I think Dr. Widener you talked with earlier, most of her board is able to attend as well. And so she and I are really working hard, not just to have a sports co-op between our 2 districts, but to also enhance wherever we can with academics and just being 2 communities who work together. So she and I have planned an event for Saturday evening where our school board members are doing a progressive dining tour of Chicago. And so both boards will be together for that. And, again, just continuing to build those relationships and work together because truly our students already do. So as adults, we need to as well.
Mrs. Vogt, I hate to do this to you. I have to let you go already. It's always good to catch you. Have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you in December.
Hey, thanks, Seth.
That is Mrs. Mary Vogt, Superintendent of Bement Schools, my guest on the phone. Network News on the way.
WHOW.
The Big 1520 WHOW Clinton 92.